you did it, like I said, it's partially for fun, partially for us to figure out who is attending every week and what we need to attract more. One thing we can all do to attract more is to invite a friend. So we hope you do that if you haven't already, maybe today. So I'm going to end that poll right now so I can have less things happening on my screen. I'll share the results, but from my end, I see 0 votes. So that's just odd. I'm going to leave that up to Jason, who is our student from Bow Valley College, who is our data analyst. If you can see it, Jason, feel free to figure out how to share. If not, no big deal. Okay.
Bridget?
Yes, Courtney.
I can see them, so they're on my phone, so I'll screen capture. But
cool.
but the number 1 superhero identified, I just need to say, is Wonder Woman.
Oh, great. I'm loving that. Having Shelley here. That's great. I'm trying to share my screen and it's not liking me. So hold on 1 second. Instead, you're seeing something I was Googling earlier today. Let's try this. I need some tech support if anybody wants to help me with that after. I have a Mac, way too many screens.
I also have it on my screen, so if you don't figure it out.
The presentation or the poll results?
The poll results.
Okay. I'm trying right now to share the presentation, but that just might not be happening by the looks of things. Let's try one more time. Can you see this presentation now? Not presented in the best way, but you can see it, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So Rainforest, here we are. Welcome everybody to Lunch Without Lunch. If you haven't been here before, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love to get to know you. To give you a bit of background about what we do here every Wednesday is we are a group of innovators, doers, dreamers, connectors, and builders who are working together to foster the culture within the ecosystem, the innovation ecosystem in Calgary. Sorry for my scrolling mouse. So a quick Zoom etiquette things, because I'm sure no one knows how to use Zoom by now. If you want to speak, we do have a lot of people in the room and we do want to encourage open conversation, but if you could just maybe plunk a, I want to ask a question into the chat and it'll just help us better with the flow of communication. And please stay muted. I got busted doing that last week at a Rainforest Edmonton event with my microphone off. It's embarrassing. We will not be using the annotate feature today, but we obviously have the polls going. So thanks for taking part with that. And anything that goes on in the chat that is of value to you, we will be capturing and throwing in the Slack channel after lunch. And if you don't know how to access the Slack channel, we'll tell you all about it in a minute. For further background on Rainforest, our vision is to create a world-class community of those dreamers, doers, connected by a common goal of making Alberta fertile ground for building, developing, and growing innovative ideas into sustainable ventures. So what do? We connect the ecosystem through this movement, and we do that through shared values of collaboration, community, and trust through storytelling. It's really all about culture, and these are the 6 pillars that we base our work around, each with their own weighting. And again, culture being the heaviest of the pillars. And this month we've been focusing on the resources. Next month's Lunch Without Lunch theme is going to be around leaders. So we're looking forward to having some conversation about leadership in the community. If you have not already signed the social contract, here it is. These 10 tenets are those that we live by here in the Rainforest. And so you can read them for yourself here or on our website. We hope that you're here and sharing these values with us, and we encourage you to sign up using your individual email address, because you'll probably move around the ecosystem if you're new to it or if you've been around for a while. So use your own personal email, and then you do gain access to that Slack channel with lots of conversation and action going on there. So today we do have 2 leaders who are going to be 2 leaders from the community who are going to be sharing their knowledge. So in the true spirit of the contract, it should be a great hour. And I had mentioned before, if you could please plop in the chat what you would like to get out of today. And that could be absolutely anything, but what would you like to get out of today? We'd love to know in the chat so that we can help make those connections. And for those of you veterans in the room, you can possibly help direct some of those too, because I get very distracted when I am operating a Zoom meeting. And so the rainforest is an analogy. Why do we call it the rainforest? Many people ask that. Apparently it's based on a book, which I have not read, comparing the ecosystem, the innovation ecosystem, to the wild and woolly rainforest, unlike farming culture, which is very risk averse and outcome based. The rainforest is very wild and crazy, just like us. So on that note, I'm going to stop sharing this screen, and we are going to turn to our presenters, and I'm going to do a quick introduction of them first, so that you know who they are and have a bit more context if you don't know who they are already, and you can start formulating your questions for them, because part of this is having open conversation. So after they're done presenting, we'd like to be able to ask them questions and hear more about their experience through our curiosity. So first we have Shelley. If you want to give a big wave, Shelley. Shelley is building the world she wants to live in. She is an activist in business, entrepreneurship, and investment. Shelley is hell-bent on taking the status quo, turning it upside down, then transforming it with more equitable, feminist, corporately sound, and ecologically sustainable options. Previous to co-founding the 51, which you may have heard of, Shelley founded crowdsourcing company Chaotix, I hope I said that right, and software development and marketing firm Stormworks. She is also currently co-founder of consumer participation company Iovia, family office Adventure Capital, and Harris Kuipers, a direct-to-consumer 100% sustainable clothing line, because she has always secretly wanted to be a fashion designer. The clothes is beautiful. I checked it out. Next, we have Trevor Prentice. After nearly a decade of experience managing and advising on intellectual property like patents, licensing, commercial agreements, get your questions ready. Trevor founded the IP Link to help fill the gap between business and legal services by helping businesses more easily prioritize, manage, and monetize their IP. Trevor has a Bachelor of Science in Physics, a Master's in Aerospace Engineering, and a Certificate of Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And in his spare time, Trevor sells speed cubes, which are better than Rubik's Cubes. They're called rocket cubes, and I'll throw the link in the chat if you want to check those out. And he also sends out a weekly newsletter called The Nerdy Parent, with fun strategies for intelligent parents. You've got to be intelligent, though. So I'll throw those links in the chat too. So on that note, we will turn it right over to Shelley. If you're ready, Shelley. I'm not sure if you had a presentation, but we can make you co-host if you do.
Yeah, when you said the word presentation, I madly grabbed some slides and put them together. And maybe, yeah, it might not be a bad idea. Maybe just to, what I'd like to do is maybe just introduce the 51 to the group. That was what I was thinking.
That'd be great.
Yeah, so let me see if
Jason or Courtney, if you can make Shelley co-host, I have lost my ability to do so. That'd be great. Are we good on that, guys?
Not yet. But maybe I can just start talking. So, hey, everyone. Great to be here. I knew of the rainforest way back when my former colleague, Jim Gibson, had got this started, right? At the very beginning with Brad Zumwalt?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, and I was living in the UK at the time. So I kind of watched it from afar, and I haven't participated in any of your sessions so far. So thank you very much for the invitation. Maybe I'll just introduce myself real quick. I was born in Alberta. My parents immigrated from the Netherlands after the Second World War. I grew up, my dad was ranger station, grew up all over northern Alberta, did my high school. I was then supposed to become a petroleum engineer because that's what everyone was doing in the 80s. I did 2 years at SAIT taking petroleum technology. I did not like it at all, but I ended up going into the patch and I worked on the upstream side. And I had an opportunity to be in a computer lab, if that's what we called it way back when, with a company called Phillips Petroleum. And they introduced me to a bunch of software and computers that were in a lab. The engineers on the floor did not want to get to know them. So I said, okay, I'll learn it. And so I had an opportunity to get into software and technology. It would have been like in 1989. I had an opportunity to work at PSI Energy Software with Jim Malcolm building out AccuMap, as well as I grew up inside of a company called Marac, which was a software energy company here in the 90s. We sold it to Schlumberger in 99. I was not a co-founder of that company, but I had the opportunity to learn from 3 amazing co-founders and really learned what it took to build a company. And from 1999 onward, after we were transacted, I've been a chronic entrepreneur / founder. But I've also had the opportunity to take some of the value that was being created along the way and invest it back in the community. So I've been an active investor since like 1998. What else would I say? I would say, you know, as a woman kind of on the energy side and on the tech side, it's been kind of lonely. There hasn't been that many of us. And, you know, I think that was a big part of the reason why I started to create my own company. So I co-founded, my first company was I co-founded a company called Stormworks in 1999 with my husband and my brother. And we transacted that company to Solium Capital in 2002. And so that was when we really got involved in Solium. And I don't know if you guys know, but Solium transacted to Morgan Stanley last year. And it was a company that most people in Calgary didn't even really know anything about, but it was a large global company. But over the past couple of decades, there have been other companies that I've co-founded and again, have just continued to invest. I've lived in the US, I've lived in Germany, I've lived in the UK. I lived in the UK for 6 years, came back. And I followed up with a dear friend of mine, Alice Reimer, and I said, this whole idea that we had about creating a fund for women, so it needs to happen. The funding gap, I don't know if you guys know, but it's really brutal. So 2.8% of all global venture funding goes to women. And if you look at the statistics inside of that 51%, because women make up 51% of the population, the statistics around, you know, race, all of the diversity factors inside of that 2.8%, it gets brutal as you go through that representation. And so we came up with the concept of the 51. The goal was to activate women's capital for women businesses. And the reason why we wanted to do that is because we wanted to change the capital going into the system. We knew that the capital going into the system today wasn't going to women. So we thought, what if we put women's capital inside of the venture system? Would more women get invested in? And so we got started last March in my kitchen. We invited an entrepreneur in the room. The entrepreneur was successful in raising capital from the women in that room. And then we just kept experimenting. Up until the end of June of this year, we had activated 6.6 million Canadian for 19 companies, all female led. While building out the 51 community, which is made up of anybody, men and women are participating. We heard over and over again, it would be really great if you would create some accessible options. So maybe I don't want to invest in a single entrepreneur, but could you create a fund? So over the summer, we worked madly to stand up a fund. We market tested it. We launched it September 4th. And within the first 4 weeks, we raised $3.3 million, 90% of which was women's capital. So right now, I think we've got about 45 investors in our fund, and we are tracking to close that fund before Christmas. We've raised the minimum of the fund so far, and so we're in a position to be investing. And we've got a really healthy pipeline of investment opportunities. And so that's just a little bit about the 51 and myself. I'm just going to see if I can actually share screen now. Can you guys see it? Yeah.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. I hate sharing my screen. I'm always scared about like, what is everyone going to see? It's like, oh shit, there's my shopping site.
Well, now I'm really going to pay attention, Shelley.
So let me, I'm just going to slide through a few slides here, guys. Hey, Brad, nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, and so, we know we're in this shit show of a year called 2020. The backdrop is, everything is changing. And so the 51 is really trying to take advantage of this landscape. You got to heard from me at the beginning. I'm definitely an activist. I want so many things to change, and I think things can just be better. Here are some statistics that I think are really eye-opening. I spoke to them before. We are the 51. Why the 51? Where did that name come from? It's because women make up 51% of the population. And still, even today, like even yesterday, people are like, why the 51? And we have to explain that. And so it's just a reminder again that women are not the minority. We actually are the majority. Other things that are really kind of playing into what the 51 is doing is this long-term view around wealth. And so there are studies now that are showing that by 2030, 65% of all wealth in Canada will be controlled by women. And what we know right now is largely women are not being invited to invest. And we know through the funding statistics that women are not being invested in. So the 51 is really looking at this as not just a societal opportunity, but a financial opportunity. So if we can create a financial platform where women can be invited to become investors and women will be invested in, we think it's a huge economic opportunity. I talked about 2.8% of all venture capital globally goes to women. It's actually 4% in Canada. What just came out recently in some new statistics by PitchBook is that actually funding in women on the venture side went down in Q3. So it's actually gone to levels of 2017. And so we're kind of going in the wrong direction, and thus, the 51 exists. One thing that's really cool about Alberta and kind of why we got started in Alberta is that 30% of all tech companies are led by women. That's twice the national average of Canada. It's 15% in the rest of Canada. It's 30% here. So there's a ton of, I just got to move this so I can see my stats. There's a ton of enterprising going on by women in Alberta, and AWE just actually released their statistics. I think it's 84 for every 100 entrepreneurs in Alberta right now, 84 are women. And so again, women are madly building businesses. We have a thesis about that at the 51, and some of it we think is attributed to yes, we're innovating different sectors and we're trying to create things from our perspective, but also to, I think, women in the workplace. Are women fitting into the kind of the current paradigm of the workplace? And so now lots of women are building businesses from their kitchen table because it's just easier and more accessible for them to do. But the other thing that I think is really important is that there's a bit of a ceiling. It's not a glass ceiling, but women-led companies, and we have the data in Alberta, they don't go beyond a certain point. They kind of stall out. They get to a certain size, a smallish business, but they don't have that growth factor. And so the 51 really wants to be playing a role in bringing that growth capital, not just to Alberta, but to Canada. And so we as a firm are investing in both Alberta, Canada, and the US. This all started from a Silicon Valley road trip. I won't get into it, but it was really disturbing for the three of us to see what was going on down there. There were some women-led funds that were being designed and created, but it was a bit of a beauty pageant. It was women walking to the other side of the pool, standing up and pitching their business, and the audience was all men, and those men had really no intention of investing in those businesses. So again, we came back to Canada and we said, there's another model here. Let's figure out what it is and let's design it. Like I said, it started in my kitchen last March. We were 75 women. We're now a community over 7,500, and that's across Canada and the US, and even people in the UK. So what we talk about is that we're a feminist financial platform where investors, entrepreneurs, and those who aspire to be, again, we take a long-term view, come together for democratized access to women-led capital, for women-led companies, to build mutual wealth, drive social impact, and become influential investors. You know, we invest in what we want to see. We innovate in the things and the products and the services that we want to consume, and that we also use our influence as consumers, right? And we're seeing that more and more, that women are going, okay, wait, before I'm buying something, where did that product come from? Who is behind that company? And women are doing that more and more. So again, we control the consumer spending. We will be controlling large amounts of wealth in the future. How does this become a business opportunity and a society opportunity? That's what the 51 is all about. We talked a little bit about the fund that we just launched. Like I said, through 15 investors previously, we invested $6.6 million in 19 companies. Those companies are across Canada and the US. We've got a really strong contingent from Alberta as well. We launched our fund. We're sitting at 45 LPs, 90% of which is women's capital, and we're targeting a micro fund of 10 million, and that will be closing before Christmas. We're focusing on digital clean tech, femtech, health tech, ag tech, and so we've got a bunch of experience and expertise on our investment committee. Maybe I'll just walk through this real quick and then I'll stop. But Elizabeth Cannon is on our investment committee, as well as Alison Sundstrom, Anita Russell. I'm sure lots of you guys know about Alice Reimer, Judy Fairburn, and myself. And so we are making up kind of the investment committee, which is going to determine where these where this fund is going to go, but we are actively going to be co-creating these investment opportunities with our community. And so, yeah, I think I'll just stop there and see if there's any questions and if there's anything else that I can share with you guys.
Thanks a lot, Shelley. I think because our topics are so different today, we will just go to questions right now for Shelley first before we move on to Trevor. Does anybody have any questions maybe while you're getting them ready? I'm curious, Shelley, how can people get involved if not as an investor?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, our community is made up of investors, entrepreneurs, and those that are aspiring. And we kind of self-identify as financial feminists. So we basically say, hey, sign up to be a financial feminist. But again, because of our long-term view, we are saying, you know, over the next 10 years, how many of us will become investors? Additionally, what we want to be able to do is serve up other products and services that are much more accessible than a venture fund. We know a venture fund is somewhat an exclusive sport right now. It's not very accessible. We've tried to make it as accessible as possible, but you still need to be an accredited investor. That's not that accessible. So we're madly working on some other product options that will allow for our broad financial feminists across the community to participate in investment activities and investment opportunities.
Great, thank you. We do have I see that you've unmuted Brad. I think Peter also has a question.
Oh, go ahead, Peter.
Hi. Great and an amazing initiative, and it's important. I've got two daughters, an economist and an architect in the family, and they can, you know, recognize all of the items that you're talking about. I was just wondering, we're in the middle of balancing our board right now and determining that we think we need a kind of a half boy, half girl board. My wife's in the dental industry and she's got an all girl team. And she says that an all-girl team can also be very challenging as a an organization and a structure and growth and all that sort of stuff. So your thoughts on this balanced sort of approach versus an all-girl team, if you will, and sorry for being kind of gender driven there, but
No, it's a great question. I would say, yeah, the women, I mean, the team at the 51 right now is all women. We actually have a young man, Jose Lopez, who helps us with our store fulfillment and managing our inventory because we've got some merchandise. But I would say we are getting men signing up as investors and as community members as well as women. And I think we've created an environment where if men are comfortable with women kind of claiming some space in a boardroom as an investor or as an innovator, or even just somebody who says, women need to be equal, we're finding that this really does resonate with men. And so we have had some men sign up to our funds, and they definitely identify as a financial feminist. So I think it's designed by women, but we're trying to make it accessible for it to be for everyone.
yeah, thank you.
Hi, Shelley. Super job. I think I was an investor back in the LaunchWorks Stormworks days too. So I would love to make sure if you're willing to take a peek at your deck before you close in December from an investment point of view. We try to invest in a lot of the venture funds around, and yours is just so important. But I guess I missed a couple things not paying adequate attention. Are you geographically focused at all with the investments? And then remind us what we should know about kind of the stage that you like to become aware of companies. I have this project where I have all the logos of all the Calgary tech companies, and if I could serve you as a fund, when would you want companies to kind of start flashing yellow? When they're approaching $1 million ARR, when they're approaching $100,000 ARR at first revenue? So first of all, geographic focus, and second, when do you want us to put companies on your radar?
Yeah, great question. So geographically, we are investing across Canada and the US. And it looks like one of our first investments coming out of the fund will be based in the US. It's led by a Canadian, but so yeah, we're investing across the border.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I would say, our community has a really strong bent to making sure that we're looking at opportunities in our own backyard.
Mm-hmm.
The 51 really wants to play a role in the transition or the transformation of the economy. And we keep saying, if 51% of the population is fully participating, there's a huge opportunity for the province.
Mm-hmm.
So we have an Alberta bias for sure. And then on the stage, I would say it's kind of like we're pre-seed, seed, Series A. We can kind of play along that continuum.
Mm-hmm.
We like the company to be female-led or co-led,
Mm-hmm.
and not just in a token way. So we will take a look at the cap table and make sure that women really have an opportunity to create value for themselves by participating in the company. We're not sector agnostic, like I said, but we are really leveraging the expertise of the investment committee to do towards different sectors.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say we'd like to see a really strong bent towards that commercialization. So it could be early revenue, but we like to see that there is this tenacity to commercialize. That would be the other kind of important aspect of the business. But we can be flexible. And I think my final point would be, the 51 wants to bring much more than just the financial capital to these companies. If we can activate our network of women as board advisors, as directors, as champions, as mentors, as coaches, as door openers, as recruiters for their team, we really want to bring a kind of a 51 factor to the investments as well as our capital.
Love it. Thanks very much. I'd be interested to have the people in my shop maybe work with you on a version of the whole logo collection that we figured out an appropriate way to highlight who of those 680 companies in Calgary are female led to your criteria, so we can just monitor that and see how they're growing along.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
What do you
Brad.
think
Thank
it
you.
might be, Brad?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I'd be delighted if we could show Shelley 30%, like she talked about on the things. So Shelley, great. I hope I can take a peek at the offering. I
Yep.
apologize. I got to jump on another call here at the bottom of the hour, but great stuff.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Brad.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye.
Brad. Thanks, Shelley. I will jump in because we will head over to Trevor so he has time. We have time to pick his brain too. And there is a question from Patrick, Shelley, about the best way for men in the community to support your work. So if you don't mind maybe throwing a response in the chat. I think you spoke to it a bit though, so the question may be answered for Patrick. But Trevor, if you're ready, we'll throw it over to you. Bit of a shift in topic here, but all around that resource pillar, and you can continue to throw questions for Shelley in the chat. And I'm not sure what the speaker's availability is after, but we always do keep the room open for a little while so we can network kind of like we used to. All right, here we go.
All right, thank you. Yeah, thanks, Bridget, for highlighting some of the bio that you mentioned. And yeah, it is a bit of a flip, so everyone will probably have to flip their brain a little bit towards some of this legal IP type stuff. I hope everyone can see my screen reasonably well and hear me all right, but just let me know if you can't. Although apparently I don't see oh, there's the chat. Okay, good. I can still get that. So yeah, I'll try to be pretty quick here, just five minutes or so. But one thing I'll say is that the presentation I have here is one that I often use for a longer presentation as well. So I'm going to just skip over a few slides, and I won't really mention anything about those particular slides in the interest of time. But if anyone does have any questions, of course, I'll go. I can easily go back to those slides. That's why I thought I'd include them all in. So feel free to ask any questions if you have them at the end. And yeah, so as Bridget mentioned, I run a business called the IP Link, and I help entrepreneurs and businesses sort through their intellectual property. So oftentimes that means, oftentimes I'm filling the gap between where a business might be at and what the lawyers can provide from a legal services perspective. So I'm not a lawyer myself, but I really understand the business side of intellectual property, so I can sort of help fill that gap and do some of the things that the lawyers don't necessarily do because it's more business strategy than legal strategy. And then ideally, hand people off so that they're a little bit more prepared when they do go work for a lawyer and they're not paying quite as much, hopefully, in some cases. So yeah, just to give a quick overview, I'll talk a bit about intellectual property in general. And then I'm sure that'll spur some questions, but there's basically lots of different types of intellectual property. So you've probably heard of many of these, and you have varying understanding, I'm sure, but patents, copyright, trademark are some of the three most well-known forms of intellectual property. I spend a lot of my time with patents. They're a bit more complicated and they just cost a little bit more, and it's more time consuming to sort through all the details. Copyright and trademark I help a little bit as well. Copyright comes into play when you're building software. You can also potentially get a patent on software, and I'll talk a bit more about patents in a minute. But copyright's not quite as strong of a form of protection. So if you're able to copyright your software code, it basically prevents people from copying and pasting that code, or maybe you're producing a written work or some other media like photos or music. So it prevents people from copying and pasting, but if you write down an idea, maybe for a product or an invention, it doesn't stop anyone from using or creating, what you've written about in that idea. Or, in the case of software code, they could potentially just look at your app and see what it does and recreate that themselves without infringing on your copyright. So that's where patents come in a bit more handy. Trademark protects your brand, so that's relevant to almost all businesses. But it comes into play. The nice thing about trademark and actually copyright is you can get automatic protection through those two forms of IP. So it's trademark you can also register, which is definitely smart to do once you start building up your brand and especially brand recognition. But initially in an early stage of a business, it doesn't make sense to spend a lot of money filing a trademark application, not necessarily until you build up that brand or get that awareness. And there's a few other forms of IP as well that I won't touch on today. So I'll skip over a few slides here that dig into some of those in particular. Well, I'll mention industrial design just in the context of patents, how they differ. So industrial design is kind of like a patent. In the States, it's actually called design patent, but it doesn't cover how a product or an invention works. It covers more how it looks and how it's designed, hence the name industrial design. I won't go into a lot of detail about that. Because yeah, I always like to spend a bit more time on patents because they are a little more complex. And the other thing about patents is there's a few requirements that you need to meet in order to get patents. So it has to be useful, which is usually not too hard for most businesses that are innovating, but it also has to be what's called novel, so completely new. This means that the patent office, they go through this process of reviewing your patent application, and they may reject your application if they deem it non-novel. So if they don't think it's new. So what they do is they go through and they search existing patents or previously filed patents and other references as well in some cases, and they try to find anything that's similar. And if they find something that's similar or the same, they'll reject your patent application. So this actually includes any references or publications that you've made. For example, if you put something on your website as a business, or if you make a sale of your product, sell your product, or even an offer to sell, then the patent office, if they would consider that a publication, and so you wouldn't actually be able to file a patent. Except in certain countries, there's a bit of a grace period. So U.S. and Canada, namely. So that's something that's important to consider early on in your business, because once you start releasing your product and publishing, what you've done, then it's difficult it may be more difficult to get a patent. So I'll skip over some of this cost and timeline stuff, but as you can see, patents can be very expensive. There's some cheaper ways of moving forward, especially on the long term, over the lifetime of a patent. But I just want to finish off with talking a bit about why would you even care about this? Why would you even want to try to get some sort of IP protection or a patent or something else? And there's lots of reasons, and it really depends on your business model, your business plan, your strategy, where you want to be, where you're currently at. So if you're looking to really grow quite significantly, maybe modeling some of the Silicon Valley type tech companies, and you're looking for investment on the hundreds of thousands or million dollar level, then intellectual property, in particular patents, I think is going to be a really important part of your strategy. Whether or not your patent has a lot of success in the long term in terms of the patent office accepting and issuing your patent, I think even just a patent application can still bring a lot of value to your business. For example, once you file a patent application, you don't need to worry about confidentiality as much, because now you can prevent people from using that idea once if the patent issues. And if it doesn't issue, it's not issuing because it means that someone else has probably already come up with that idea. So you didn't really need to keep it confidential at all. And you can really improve your credibility with potential customers, investors, partners. And this actually ties into the idea of commercial agreements as well, because anytime you're putting an agreement in place with an employee, subcontractor, partner, even sometimes customers, if your product, if you're selling above a certain dollar value, then you want to consider the IP situation, and you want to put some clauses in those agreements dealing with who owns IP, especially if it's a collaboration to develop something new. So there's some reasons to file patents and patent applications just like that, whether that patent becomes an issued patent in the end. And then I've got a couple more reasons here before I close off. Yeah, so another model that some businesses and some entrepreneurs like to consider is inventing or developing a product and then licensing it to an existing company. And the benefit here is that you can start to bring in some licensing revenue, ideally from the larger company that you're licensing to, and you can access their manufacturing expertise and just distribution channels and so forth. So it can sometimes be an interesting model to pursue if you've got a few ideas, or if you've got products that you're just not having a lot of success with commercializing yourself, or maybe you're running into manufacturing hurdles or distribution hurdles. So that's something I help a lot of clients with, actually, is pursuing licensees, making sure their IP is in a position where it's ready to look for a license, and then finding licensees, and then helping manage those relationships going forward in terms of looking at what clauses might you need in a licensing agreement, and how much should you be asking for, those types of questions. So, but it can also, you know, even if you're just pursuing a business and building your own manufacturing, selling your product, or maybe it's a software-based business, patents and other IP can certainly increase your net worth and add to your competitive differentiation. So you can eventually, you know, prevent your competition from using those ideas if you've got some strong IP surrounding there. So, bit of a whirlwind, and I went over a minute or two. I apologize, but I'm guessing there will be some questions since I went through all that pretty quick. So yeah, feel free to, I guess, throw any questions in the chat or just unmute yourself, whatever the process is. Oh, and one thing oh, sorry, go ahead, Peter.
I'm working with some licensing patent holders right now, and they filed, and if this is a longer question, we can just take it offline, but they've been advised to really monitor their patent and the distribution of that information so effectively, because it's undefensible if, you know, they share their patent information out to various groups. Could be, you know, sometimes you have to go into the government and disclose some of this stuff if you're looking for funding, although, you know, the government guys say they're completely, you know, not going to share this information. But the patent office will say, you know, if you haven't properly defended and kept this stuff as secret as possible and tracked who's got your information, they will not be defendable. Is that something, is it a longer conversation that you don't want to talk about?
I mean, yeah, I'm happy to chat after the call too, but in terms of like a quick answer, because yeah, a lot of this patent stuff, you can really get into a rabbit hole, the ins and outs of the details. So, but a bit of a quicker answer. I mean, it depends a little bit on when you make that first patent application. So when you first file in whichever country you start in. So you can actually get started in one country, let's say US or Canada. The US has a nice system called the US provisional patent. So you can get started with filing something like that. And once you get that filing date, now you're a little bit safer to start to tell people without a confidentiality agreement in place, without an NDA. I think probably what you're referring to is if you start to tell people, you know, outside of an NDA or a confidentiality obligation prior to making that initial application, then yeah, the patent office, basically the day you start telling people, you can no longer get a patent in most countries. US and Canada has a 1-year grace period. So if you publicly disclose or if you've released your idea already, you could potentially still get a patent up to a year after that initial date. So just make sure you're tracking those dates closely. But it's better to just keep your options open, because you know you could still only have to file in Canada initially. But if you do it right before publication or public release or any kind of a conversation like that, then you could still potentially file in Europe up to a year, maybe even longer later, or these other countries. So yeah, hopefully that at least touches on your question. I see a few other questions. I'm happy to chat with anyone after the call. So I'll put in my contact info after as well. But I see a couple other questions there.
Yeah, there's a question from Kate. You can unmute if you'd like, Kate.
Hi, yes, thank you. Yeah, my question was, I think it's similar to Peter's in terms of at which stage do I start looking into the IP licenses and security. And for example, if I want to build a first prototype for some new technology, so do I do it before I build the first prototype or do it after?
Sure. Yeah. So it really comes into, I mean, you should think about the timing more in terms of when you first need to release the idea or release the product or publish it in any way, especially to a level that someone could kind of understand what you're doing. So how it works more than, you know, what the benefits are. So I've gone back a few slides here and I've got this timeline. So it's all really relative to when you think you need to disclose or publicly release, which may be, you know, if you're releasing if you're starting to look for investors and you're starting to do pitches and those types of things, then you would certainly, I would suggest you'd want to try and file a patent before that, at least an initial patent application, because that would be considered a public disclosure. So yeah, so in terms of timing, you know, developing a prototype's okay if you're doing it in secret, even a second version. And you want to get as far as you can in that development because you might face new problems while you're working on the prototype that you find unique, innovative solutions to. And so you want to include those, you know, those ideas in the patent application that you're writing. So that way, if you file too early, you're not going to include all that stuff that you've come up with in the process of developing your prototype. But if you file too late, you just can't get a patent anymore in a lot of countries if you wait until after you've published. So yeah, it's that careful timing, you know, in terms of where you're at. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, okay, great. Yep, thank you very much.
Ben, do you want to jump in?
Sure. So my question is about, let's say you're a startup entering a particularly competitive space, but you've come up with a way to, you know, do things better, faster, cheaper than your competitors, but you're still a startup, right? So obviously it's worthwhile protecting your invention as you enter the space, and your competitors are going to start looking at how you're outcompeting them. But in terms of actually defending that patent, I feel like a lot of startups don't actually have the teeth to go after, like say a larger incumbent that might look at the startup and then infringe or maybe even just partially infringe on that idea.
Yeah, that's a great point, and you're right with patents. I mean, it can be, there's value that you can get from a patent prior to, you know, just going out and attempting to sue someone for patent infringement, which I would argue, you know, even for a relatively medium to large size company, you're probably, you know, even if you win such a lawsuit, you're probably really going to lose because of legal costs and all these different things, and you're also sort of like giving yourself a bit of a worse name in terms of, oh, now this guy's going to sue everyone and all. So I wouldn't necessarily suggest that as even a longer term strategy. I would suggest that patents are better as tools for improving your negotiating position and improving your credibility with other potential partners. So, you know, if you see a competitor out there who seems to be infringing on your patent, for example, let's say you get a patent, then I rather than, you know, sending a cease and desist letter or something like that, I would approach them in a bit more of a positive light and say, hey, you know, I've noticed you're doing something similar that we're doing. Would you be interested in a partnership or licensing the right to use, you know, our improvements? And maybe you're initiating that discussion in a way where you're suggesting that, you know, there's some differences there, but, you know, you've got an improved version and you could potentially help each other. Then I think, you know, you don't even, the other nice thing about that approach is you don't even need an issued patent. You could be starting those kinds of conversations when you just have a provisional patent or an initial application. So, and now you're getting all that benefit because in the negotiation, you can include, you know, the list of your patents if you have one or more in the appendix, and it sort of, it just adds to the credibility and the level that, you know, your business appears to be at. So that's more the approach I would take. But you're right. I mean, if you ever do want to pursue that longer term strategy of really preventing your competition from using your idea, then you've got to be able to have the teeth. But the other thing I'd say on that is it doesn't come for a while. It can take 3 to 5 years for your patent to issue after your initial application, depending on which countries you pursue and your process for that. So, you know, by then, think about where your business could be at that point. Maybe you will have some funding to you know, cover some of those additional legal costs. So maybe there's other strategies there that in the longer term can help. But yeah, I would argue against doing that in general. So
cool. Thanks. Sounds like a good approach.
Thanks, Ben. We have 2 more questions, and I will ask if you have announcements to maybe throw them in the chat, because I have a feeling we'll run till close to the top of the hour. So Al has a question about patent trolls.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about patent trolls and some of the serious problems that they have. One group of lawyers or something put together a patent that said if a computer talks to another computer to receive data, then they have a patent on that. And they go around suing small companies who have put apps in the Apple App Store and winning settlements out of court. And then they're using all those settlements to use as ammunition against going after Apple or something eventually down the road or whatever. And apparently it's a huge problem, maybe mainly in the States or something, but I was wondering if you had any comments on that.
Yeah, I think that definitely has been a problem in some sense. I mean, it's, I guess I don't have a huge opinion on it. I mean, there's people out there that are doing that kind of thing. You know, the clients that I'm working with obviously are more just entrepreneurs and businesses trying to promote, you know, or trying to protect their own work. But I mean, one thing that I'll say is probably a lot of those patents that are filed that are more patent trolls, you know, they could probably be invalidated in court if anyone did go through the full court case. But to do that would probably just cost more than settling. So that's, yeah, it's this interesting business model where you could probably eke a little bit of money and then work your way up to a bigger lawsuit or something. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have a ton of comments on that other than, yeah, it's probably not a great model to pursue.
But you haven't had, like, it isn't so prolific that you've seen it quite a bit or anything like that.
No, I haven't seen it that much. I mean, I used to help the University of Alberta researchers file patents on their technologies. And you know, there was sometimes people would raise this question like, wait, universities filing patents, aren't they just like patent trolls basically, because they don't actually commercialize anything? And so, you know, sometimes I would have to argue a little bit against that and say, well, they may not be commercializing their own stuff, but we're actively pursuing licensees, and it is their own research and inventions. It's not like they're trying to like file some tricky patent and just word it in a way where it gets issued. So but yeah, other than that, I haven't seen really much. You hear about it, but and again, I mean, I try to stay out, especially not being a lawyer, but I try to stay out of that sort of more negative side of patents and help people find value in the earlier stages of approaching IP and patents. So yeah, that's sort of how I stay out of it.
Okay, great. And it looks like we have a question from Tom.
Yes. Picking up on Al's point, actually, I just had to laugh as a lawyer, a longtime lawyer. I see, you know, he brings examples of the best in the legal profession that are out there chasing that. It occurred to me, though, a possible response to these people that are being trolled is, you know, to you know, call up their friendly class action lawyer and wondering if you could sort of you know, put it back on the troll, if you will, for basically taking money out of the pockets on, you know, spurious claims and forcing, you know, the expense of time and money. So anyway, that's not my side point. I unfortunately was quite frustrated with my back office and my IT group, which is myself, trying to listen to your point. I got your presentation, and maybe you covered on a few of these things. A couple of observations. Great niche. Like as someone who has been, you know, a partner in large law firms, and particularly in this world where, you know, entrepreneurs are trying to get some knowledge, but you know, especially the larger firms, at the end of the day, they're a bunch of specialists, right? So, you know, a general lawyer will say, oh, I'll refer you to, you know, our IT guy or gal, and, you know, then the clock sort of starts, right? But as you've no doubt found out, your value is actually, you know, doing some of that, you know, spade work, I guess I'd call it, and get the person as ready as possible. So when the button is proverbially turned on, right, that stays on for as short a period of time as possible. It's an excellent service, and you know,
thank you.
I really I think it's just great. Just out of curiosity, like, do you? I know it's a little dangerous to sort of do this overtly, but do you sort of kind of mention to, let's say, non-IP lawyers in firm contexts that, you know, if you're looking for a cheaper alternative, which might mean for the temporary period that the business is actually not within the law firm per se, right? But on the theory that if you are able to help them to get to a certain state where they would quite willingly, you know, go back to the firm that you kind of did an end around, if you will, in terms of their need to have everything, you know, sort of cross-marketed, if you will.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a great suggestion. I mean, I haven't, obviously I work with a lot of lawyers, IP lawyers, because my clients, you know, once I get them to that stage, and to comment on your point about the value that I provide, I mean, I'm helping, a lot of times I find entrepreneurs or businesses, they don't even quite know what they have that could be patentable. So I do a lot of work sort of even, you know, sifting through what they've developed and sorting, you know, even if it's just one invention or one product, oftentimes there's different aspects within that product and one or more of those aspects could be patentable. So yeah, I help sift through all that, do some prior art searching and develop a bit of a strategy, an IP strategy generally. And then oftentimes it does focus in on patents, but but then, yeah, obviously I still, you know, don't do the patent drafting myself. Sometimes I'll help draft an invention description that the lawyer can use to more efficiently draft the patent, but I'm still not drafting patents. So I'm always working with patent lawyers, but that's a good point. I could certainly get in touch with some non-IP lawyers as well, who probably, you know, need this intermediary almost as, but even the IP lawyers, I find, you know, sometimes they're referring some clients back to me that aren't quite at that stage yet, and they need some of that preparatory work done. So yeah, that's a great suggestion. And I know we're getting pretty close to the hour. I can certainly stay on a couple minutes and ask a few more questions, but anyone who does have to leave, I put a few links in the chat there. One, if you want to book another, you know, quick call or just have another conversation with me, if you have some questions that you didn't have time for, or that maybe we're a little more confidential, then feel free to use that booking link, or email me. And then, yeah, if you want to just connect with me on LinkedIn, feel free to click on that LinkedIn link as well. But yeah, I don't know, Bridget, if we have time for a couple more.
Trevor, I will definitely do that, because I've got a few other angles, and this is particularly, again, as an observation of mine, a little bit of knowledge by the entrepreneurs about what they need on IP is, I'll go say, as dangerous as, or more dangerous, I would say, as a little bit of knowledge on another aspect of business law. And I have firsthand example of entrepreneurs that said, oh yeah, Tom, I've taken care of the IP. And you look at it, because it's all publicly available information, you go, yeah, you know, you probably haven't been keeping up with stuff, because you've got about 5 notices from Industry Canada that you haven't responded to, you know, like, and you're going to be, you're just going to be spending a whack of dough. And it's amazing how the words "I'm good" can really be bandied around, and it's a tricky area. And this from someone who's been a lawyer for over 30 years.
Yeah,
Thanks,
exactly.
Tom.
That's where I try to get those details. You know, okay, what do you mean by you're good?
Yeah.
But
okay.
yeah, we should definitely.
Thanks for sharing, guys. Yeah, we definitely need to wrap it up, but please feel free to keep the conversations going after. And again, we'll keep the room open. If you do have any announcements, please throw them in the chat. We do have a couple minutes, but I do want to make some announcements on behalf of Rainforest. We currently have the scorecard assessments open for both Calgary and Edmonton region. So it doesn't matter if you've been involved in the ecosystem for a day or thousands. If you could please check out the links in the chat or go to the website and fill out a scorecard assessment for us. It would really help us take a pulse of culture in the ecosystem in both cities. The other announcement from Rainforest is that we currently have the Libby Fund open for applications. And so please share that within your network. It's for anybody who has an idea, a tech-enabled or technology idea that they would like to take a little bit further. They can apply via our website, and I'll throw the page in the chat as well, and they'll gain access to programs from many of our funders like Startup Calgary, 321 Growth Academy, and Nicer, and Good Lawyer has also come in on that with some legal advice. So there is a lot of benefit to applying for the Libby Fund. Am I missing anything? If Courtney, Aaron, anyone else from Edmonton there? I think we're good. I know there are lots of questions for our presenters, and I'm not sure if they can stay, but if they can, we'd love to have you stay a few more minutes. And I will leave the chat open, and I'd like to thank everybody for their time today, for joining us and choosing our event over the many virtual events there are. It really keeps the community going. And we do have a poll open just on your feedback. It's totally optional, but it will help us formulate even better programming in the future. So thanks all and have a great day.
Great job, Bridget. Thank you very much. It was great.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for
Thanks. I'm happy to stay on for a couple minutes.
Thanks, Trevor. And thank you, Shelley, if you're still there. Big thank you.
I'm just trying to scroll back through the chat and see what questions I missed there. If any